chainers, wherever you are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended Podcast, and the founder of the Blended Pledge. As you can probably hear, I came back from Manifest with a little bit of a head cold. I've tried to sleep it off all weekend, but now it's turned into a bit of a cough. So bear with me today, but we've got a great show for you. Laura Robb is here from S&P Global, and we're going to be talking all about TPM. TPM is coming up March 2nd through 5th, and there's so much to talk about. So before we do that, let's talk about our show sponsors. So the Secret Society of Supply Chain. If you haven't gone to check it out yet, go and check it out. secretsocietyofsupplychain.com. This is the Let's Talk Supply Chain in-person events and membership groups, and we've got something for everyone. Everyday supply chainers, women in supply chain, plus marketing professionals in supply chain as well. So go check it out, secretsocietyofsupplychain.com, and join us today. Now, if you're in the audience, we want to hear from you. Make sure you tell us where you are tuning in from. If it's just an emoji because you're enjoying yourself so much, put that in the comments because we'd love to hear from you. All right, let's get to what is happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain. So we have a brand new Woman in Supply Chain episode 450. Wow, I can't even believe we are at episode 450 on the podcast with Jenny Perlich. And this is a really great story and episode about her journey in supply chain and her coming to co-found her business and so much more. If you haven't gone to check it out, it is available wherever you listen to the show. It's on our YouTube channel as well as our website, letstalksupplychain.com. All right. Now, we've got some brand new LinkedIn events coming up. We've got 2 happening tomorrow and 1 happening next week that you're not going to want to miss. So make sure to click the link in the comments. Go and click the attend button. Even if you can't attend live, we will send you the recording. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, Christine Barnhart is going live with Matt Steiner, VP Head of Supply Chain and Distribution and E-commerce at L'Oreal. Now, they're going to be talking all about L'Oreal supply chain, agility, digitalization, and external manufacturing. You do not want to miss this. This is happening tomorrow. Again, we are going to go live at 1 o'clock tomorrow. I'm going to be hosting with Mark, the CTO of Softion. Now, if you've been wondering about warehouse automation and how you can achieve long-term success, this is for you. So come and join us for this LinkedIn Live. We are going to be talking about using warehouse automation for that long-term success. You can ask questions in the comments. We are going to get to all your questions, and there's going to be a lot of amazing insight. So again, click the attend button and we will send you the link. Next week, I'm going to be co-hosting with MVK on the margins, talking about solving the problem of change adoption. Amanda Petraska, CEO of Wonder Services, is going to be joining us. Now, that's next Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, and I can't wait because these are 2 of my favorite people. So come and join us because we're going to have a lot of fun. Last but not least, we've got some in-person events, and we're going to be talking all about TPM today on the show, and that's happening March 2nd through 5th in Long Beach. And then, of course, we've got Home Delivery World May 21st and 22nd. So, excuse me. Now it's time to bring up my guest, Laura, to the stage. All right. Welcome, Laura. How you doing today?
Doing great, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. Now, TPM is one of my favorite shows. We're going to be talking about what we're going to be doing there in just a minute. But for everybody who doesn't know you, why don't you let everybody know who you are and what you do?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm thrilled to be a guest here. My name is Laura Robb. I am an associate editor at the Journal of Commerce. I joined the team last year, bolstering their already incredible coverage of the Trans-Pacific, but also expanding their existing coverage on the North-South lane, so trade between North and South America. I also am knee-deep all the time in cold chain, so on the temperature-controlled side of shipping. Been there since last year, but before that, I was still under the S&P umbrella. I actually worked on the Platt side at a container index. So my background's in covering dry 40-foot containers. I know a lot about the pricing side. I covered the Trans-Pacific and North-South lanes there. And now this year, and since I've joined the team, I'm just writing full time about these lanes I'm super, super familiar with. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Awesome. I love that. Now, you mentioned cold chain, and we have a show on Let's Talk Supply Chain about cold chain with PackSafe, but you have a portion of TPM that's going to be focused on cold chain. Now, this is a growing sort of topic area in supply chain, and you're focusing some of the upcoming event on that, right?
Absolutely. I will be moderating 2 cold chain panels myself, actually. This will be our second year of TPM cold chain with 8 sessions over 2 days. So it's definitely a can't miss event if you are on the temperature controlled side of the industry.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait. All right. So let's get to our poll of the week. So we ask a question to the community every single Wednesday morning. Now, this one got about 216 votes so far. We still have 1 day left. So if you haven't voted on this, head over to the poll in the comments and make sure your voice is heard. Now, the question was, what was your first role in supply chain? So 33% of you said warehouse associate. And then we had a tie at 22% for procurement assistant and inventory coordinator. And then we also had 23% logistics analyst. So Laura, tell us how you got started.
Yeah, so obviously my background is journalism, and that is what my degree is in. But I feel like most people in this industry either knew what they wanted to do for a very long time and they went to school for it, or they entered the industry as soon as they could and really dove into it, be it their interests or maybe their family did it or maybe your location, what have you. But there are a lot of people that knew exactly where they wanted to be and they're there now. I'm in the latter part, that is people who kind of got thrust into the supply chain world and then fell in love with it, which I feel like it is a very like addicting industry that once you have that bug, it's hard to get rid of. But yeah, my background's in journalism. I was actually the editor of a newspaper here in Texas for several years before my husband got a job in the Pacific Northwest. My background was writing about local government, and obviously government in Oregon and Seattle are much different than government in Texas. So I kind of left my journalism roots and got into a subscription box company where we sourced products from all over the globe, South America,
Cool.
Europe, Asia, Africa. And while wearing that hat, I didn't know that I'd be writing about it one day, but found the opportunity, got a referral to Platts and said, hey, you used to work in shipping, kind of on the inventory management side. And I was like, yeah, no, I'd love to write about it. So finding 2 things that I really enjoyed doing and then getting the opportunity to come back to this industry after going back to journalism, local journalism for several years, it's been a joy because it's just so interesting. There's so much to write about.
Yeah, I love that story. Now, I want to hear from everybody in the audience about what your first role in supply chain was. If anybody has sort of seen my backstory, I grew up sort of in the industry. My first role actually was receptionist at the family business, and I spent about, I don't know, 18 months there. And it was actually probably one of the best things I could have done because I really got to understand who did what in the company. And then I moved on to trucking sales, trucking operations, and then into ocean freight sales, and eventually director of sales and marketing. Now, I do want to point out a few people who commented on the poll. Now, Laura says export bookings when bookings involved a fax machine. Man, can I tell you, I remember that fax machine. And there was so much paper involved. And at the same time as the fax machine, we also had the typewriter as well. We all use typewriters for checks to be able to send checks to the steamship lines, which is crazy. Rebecca says payables. Scott says, I've been doing this so long that the term supply chain didn't even exist, and there were no college level classes in supply chain. Keith says planner, buyer role, still learning every day with the constant challenges and changes. And there's so many roles in supply chain, right? There's so much happening. There's so many things that you can do that it's so interesting to hear how everybody just gets into the industry. All right, so let's get to your market update. Now, here is the point of the show where we just want to let people know, what are you hearing? You've got an ear to the ground. You're writing about what's happening in the industry. We're going to talk about a few of the, major topics in the industry moving forward in this show. But what market update, what do you think people should be concentrating on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in a really interesting time. Carriers are pushing for long-term contract rates, but shippers are kind of dragging their feet on nailing those down, which is traditional. That is normal for this time of year. Some unusual things though that we're having happen this year that are new are smaller NVOs are having a hard time getting contracts in general, kind of getting ignored by carriers, having to pool their cargo with larger forwarders to get that space. Um, and we also are seeing the alliance restructuring, which obviously the dust is settling, and we have these new alliances. Well, a new alliance, and while the disruptions to schedules and services haven't been super impactful, we are seeing a trend of like new partnerships between NVOs and carriers that maybe they didn't do business with before.
Huh.
So it's not necessarily a super loud time of year, but there's a lot of fluidity and a lot of moves being made. And the moves being made now are going to really shape the market whenever things heat up in peak season and the end of contract season. And everyone knows how pivotal TPM is to contract season in this industry. So I think after that point, we'll have a much more clearer path forward. But we're at the precipice of a lot of action.
Yeah, and I think it's really based on a lot of uncertainty. I mean, it's not that I don't like using that word, but I almost feel like it's become a bit of a buzzword. I feel like we used the word uncertainty throughout 2024. Then we used it around, what was happening in November. Now we're
Perhaps
using it at the beginning of, the year, January, February. I don't know. I think we have to get used to living in this sort of uncertain world. There's a lot shaking out. There's a lot happening. We're not sure what's going to end up actually sticking at the moment, right?
definitely, definitely. And I think that you're absolutely right. I hate to say uncertainty because obviously nobody knows what's going to happen. It's a lot of speculation, but I do feel like we kind of replaced that unprecedented with uncertain. But we are in such an unusual time. Like last year, we had the threat of the ILA strike looming. We had
Yes.
a lot of different situations and circumstances than we do this year. And I think that things have kind of appear more settled, but really when you look at all of the moving parts and the possibility for shifts, I think that people should avoid getting too comfortable in their budgets and their plan because, as you know, obviously anything can happen in this industry. So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think it's really hard to sort of plan forward or too far forward, right? I think a lot of people want to be able to plan a little bit more, and maybe the leaders of an organization are putting pressure on procurement and supply chain professionals right now to be able to plan further into the future. But the hands are really tied at the moment, for us to really be able to do that and provide the answers that they're looking for.
hmm
Right? And I
yeah,
think we have to remember that. All right, let's get to our first article because we're kind of tiptoeing around what we're going to be talking about. So, this particular article talks about the contract rates for this year. So anybody who is shipping product by ocean freight is going to want to read this particular article. This article is by S&P Journal of Commerce, and it goes into some of the discussion points that we are going to be talking about at TPM. One of the reasons why a lot of people do go to TPM is to have the discussions with the steamship lines and start negotiating the contracts. Now, I don't want to say that they necessarily sign contracts because in this particular article, they're talking about delaying signing contracts with the steamship lines till the end of April because things are up in the air so much. So talk to me about this article. Why is it so important? I'll come back to a couple more notes that I have in just a minute.
yeah, absolutely. So I think to totally understand what's going on this year, we kind of have to look at last year a little bit. Last year was unusual. we had the Red Sea reroutes begin just before the year began. So end of 23, we had those reroutes around the Cape of Good Hope. We saw that initial spike in rate levels at the very beginning of the year, but by the time March had come around, we saw those rates kind of pull back. And I think a lot of people thought that that spike was going to be the spike. Oh, there you go. You got it right there. Spike reflective of what rates were. You can see that before the big jump right above 2024, you see that smaller but still notable increase. So when that happened, we kind of expected rates to behave normally. So carriers treated contracts like a normal season. But we actually hadn't seen the significant impacts from those reroutes yet. And with the pressures of the ILA contract being outstanding at that point, a lot of shippers wanted to bring their cargo in earlier in the year to avoid congestion associated with late shipments before that ILA potential strike, as well as really just trying to get ahead of those peak season costs. So they kind of just became a self-fulfilling prophecy, pushed peak season up a little bit, like we've seen for not in 2023, but the year before that. So it's not something we've never seen before, but we did have all of that tightened capacity. And because of those elevated rates being so much higher than contract rates last year, a lot of money was left on the table for carriers. And they don't want to make that same mistake this year. So we are seeing carriers enter the conversation, trying to lock down those contract rates early at elevated levels compared to what we saw last year. But something to note is that going into 2024, we had just seen a really dismal year in 2023 with volume. So we weren't necessarily expecting the big spike. And then those contract rates became hard to fulfill for carriers when spot rates were so much higher. So the behavior we're seeing this year is kind of both making up for that and learning from that experience. And the carriers are not wanting that to happen again. They're going into negotiations asking for higher levels because of things like the Suez uncertainty, the tariff uncertainty, and depending on how those factors play out, there's a very good chance you will have wanted to lock in at these rates that they're offering now, but also there's a very good chance that the market's going to behave completely differently. So like you said, there is a lot of uncertainty. But if we were to see a big black swan event shift the market, we could be looking back at these rates, and right now we're saying, oh yeah, they're higher than last year, but it could be the right decision to lock in. It really just depends on how the next several months play out.
Yeah, and such a role to be a leader in supply chain right now and sort of gambling with, do we do it now? Do we lock in now? Do we wait and sort of see what happens? And it's not an easy thing to do. If anybody has any questions for Laura, just make sure to put them in the comments. I want to make sure that we get to those because this is such an important discussion with anybody who's moving product by ocean freight right now. One of the things that I saw in this article was that price wasn't a huge concern for everybody, but actually securing the space is much more of a concern. So
I would agree.
You talk about like gambling with the price, whether to lock in now, lock in later. Some people are waiting to sign till the end of April. What influence does that have on space? So if you sign now, do you get, that security of space versus signing
theoretically
later?
That is what you are the agreement that you're making, but as we've seen in this industry, contracts are a lot of it. This is relationship based. A contract only has so much bearing, and I think a lot of the getting that space and making sure that things are fulfilled on both sides, it's more so trying to maintain those relationships and deliver what you're promising so that next year when things come around, you do get that I don't want to say being prioritized, I guess is the right word, because of that existing relationship. And honestly, if people are, like you said, this is such an important conversation. And if people do want to know more, I cannot recommend enough. You've got to go to TPM 25 because that is where we're going to unpack all of these things at length.
Well, and I think it's important to note too is being armed with data and knowledge going into some of these negotiations to not just talk about price, but to talk about securing the space, et cetera, et cetera. The more information that you go into these negotiations with, the better. right? Everybody knows that now, right? Data is sort of king. You need to have your data ready and available for those negotiations. You need to understand what the experts, the analysts are saying for this year as well to go into those negotiations too. So, in saying that, let's now talk about TPM 25. So, this is coming up March 2nd through 5th. Now, if you don't have your ticket, I don't know what you're waiting for, because 5,000 supply chain logistics professionals descend on Long Beach for TPM 25, and the sessions are so educational. You're going to learn so much to be able to not only go into those negotiations, but maybe even plan for your 2025 when it comes to shipping, logistics, supply chain. So talk to me a little bit about some of the highlights that are coming up for TPM 25 and why people should join us.
Absolutely. If you have not bought your tickets, you should register. I cannot recommend it enough. This will be my third year attending, but my first year attending on the Journal of Commerce side. As I had mentioned, I was at Platts before that. So I'm so excited to see the inner workings of this event, because anyone who's been knows that this is unlike any other conference that exists. This year, I think we have almost 180 speakers in 79 sessions. They're talking about the uncertainty around the new administration, the new Gemini service, schedule reliability, tariff implications, overcapacity, and supply chain disruptions, obviously. Artificial intelligence is a hot topic this year, and obviously cold chain, which is my specialty. This will be our second year of TPM Cold Chain. Like I had mentioned, we have 8 sessions over 2 days. So if you're looking at that part of the industry, you definitely should attend. But honestly, parallel to that, we've got TPM Tech, led by my colleague Eric Johnson. And that'll be covering a ton this year as well, especially those AI topics, which are shaping the future of the industry, frankly. It's going to be an incredible year. We have, I think 3,850-ish attendees at this point registered, but that doesn't even consider all of the people that just come to town for the event, for the networking opportunity, because if you've ever been in Long Beach during TPM, you can look to your left and look to your right, and everyone's going to be in this industry, whether or not they're a formal registered attendee. We've surpassed the number of BCOs that attended last year. We've got Pepsi, Wayfair, Exxon, Gap. Everyone is sending their best, but obviously not just shippers. We've NVOCCs, government entities, port and terminal operators, rail, air, all the intermodal side, media, carriers, regulatory compliance and financial stuff, air cargo, and again, cold chain. So no matter what you are looking into, you should definitely be attending this conference if you want to be following this side of the supply chain stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And you have educational sessions, I believe, that happen on the Sunday, which is March 2nd. Those are really great sessions. If you're new to TPM, there's actually, I think, a newbie session as well to sort of help you navigate through TPM, which I think is amazing because it can be fairly overwhelming. There's a lot of conversations and sessions that you want to go to. There's a lot of networking events, like you said, as well. There's going to be a recharge room, which I'm excited because a blended pledge is going to be in that recharge room. And I love the concept of being able to go into just a simple space outside of the noise to recharge just for a few minutes. And I know that's important for shippers at TPM as well. And then for me, I'm going to be hosting TPM TV, and I'm going to be bringing you sneak peeks into some of the sessions so that you can have an idea of what you are missing out on if you're not going to TPM. But we're not going to be giving you all the secrets. So stay tuned. Make sure you follow S&P Global Journal of Commerce on social media, because we are going to be releasing those, I believe, the day of or the next day, so that you have an idea of some of the insights that we shared, but not all of the magic, because you've got to be there for that. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we go on?
No, just like this, really, there is no other opportunity to be around this caliber of shipping expertise on this lane. And obviously, the event itself is incredible. The sessions are next level, and the networking opportunities irreplaceable. But the offsite events put on through companies that are sponsoring and attending are also such a hoot. So I'm excited for the fun to be had, but also for me to really get to know a bunch of news sources. So if anyone's watching right now and wants to sees me out there, chat me up, find me. I'd love to talk. I'm the tall, loud girl, so I'm easy to spot.
Well, I can't wait to see everybody too. All right, let's get to our last article because I know everybody's been waiting for this one because we're talking about corn syrup. And they're like, what does corn syrup have to do with supply chain? And I'll tell you, Laura was questioning me on this one as well. But this particular article tells the story about corn syrup in America and how it traditionally competed with traditional sugar, cane sugar, I believe, and beet sugar. As you read through this article, now it's fascinating because there's a variety of opinions in the health world about corn syrup. That's not why we're here. Okay. We're not here to debate whether it's good for you or bad for you or whatever. What we are here is to take a look at the story and how tariffs. So, this is a great story about supply and demand and how tariffs have actually shaped the story of corn syrup. Now, with everything that's happening right now and all the uncertainty around tariffs, this article is a really great look into how tariffs are politicized and how they can actually have impact on what you do on a day-to-day. So, Laura, when you saw this, I know you were questioning me why we were talking about it, but I know as you dove into it, you were like, oh, I see now. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't totally sure at the beginning, but there are tons of parallels, and I gotta say, fascinating article overall. Not something I knew about. Was not aware of how political corn syrup really was.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for the enlightening bit there. But yeah, no, we are seeing tariffs affect our day-to-day life right now, and there are a lot of unknowns in how it's all going to play out. And you can see historically how tariffs have been used as a political tool. But these blanket tariffs right now are pretty chaotic and a little bit being approached a little differently in terms of knowing where the end game is. That said, they're definitely being used as political tools, especially the North American tariffs, which I feel, and I've really heard from a lot of sources, are kind of a little bit more fluid in that they're pawns kind of to put strength in this China tariff. Right now, that China tariff is at 10%, which isn't exactly enough to drive customers back to American made, which is kind of what we looked at in this article a little bit, promoting that US business. But if we were to see that 10% increase, right now that 10% is kind of just I'm hearing a lot of sources saying, well, manufacturers are taking 5%, we're paying 5%, deals are being done to get it covered. But if that number were to grow to 20, 30, 40, 50, it would definitely be impacting the industry, whether that is front loading ahead of the potential tariffs, or if that is price changes down the roads and consumers picking up those costs. It's the long-term implications and also just kind of understanding where things are going to land. It's very uncertain, but to look at how these are being played into politically, I think are very important. And if tariffs are something you're interested in, we've got plenty of experts at TPM 25 to enlighten you and get you at least all the speculation that we can do with this uncertainty around the new administration, playing out how each potential road could land. So
yeah. Well, and it's such an interesting story right now. It's one of the reasons why I picked it because this goes back to I think it was the 1960s where tariffs were used politically to be able to drive one commodity over another. And I'm just not sure if people know that story and the influence that tariffs have over particular commodities and whether one wins out over the other. But one thing that we don't talk enough about in supply chain is the sourcing component. And we source materials and ingredients. And this talks about how Coke and Pepsi actually changed the makeup of their product based on corn syrup prices. And so tariffs really do drive health and wellness decisions for everybody when you think about this particular story around corn syrup versus sugar. All right, we have gone over. Laura, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show, talking about tariffs, talking about TPM 25. I can't wait to see everybody there in just under 2 weeks, I think it is. Thanks for everybody for joining us this week. Next week, I've got Omar from Reform that's going to be on. You're not going to want to miss that because you thought talking about AI agents was interesting last week. Well, we are going to be talking about AI, but answering all your clients' questions. So stay tuned for that one. Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much